Additional aids and services are available to individuals with disabilities. To make such a request, please contact us by email by clicking the Help tab in the PD portal or at pdportal@tamu.edu, by phone including Relay Texas at 1-800-441-7323, or in writing to Train PD, PD Portal Support, 4477 TAMU, College Station, Texas 77843. Both a transcript and accessible document of the content presented in this webinar can be found as resources in the course description. Click on the blue links under Course Resources in the description. When a link is clicked, a new browser window will open.
So you're here for No is a complete sentence, learning how to set boundaries at work. So this is a session that will help us help our students in terms of setting boundaries at work. I do want to welcome our presenter, Victoria Hinojosa. Victoria has served as a career navigator with Workforce Solutions in Houston Galveston region since 2019, and she's currently an AL instructor with Lone Star College. She's a graduate of Texas State University with a bachelor's degree in mass communications. She's passionate about helping people discover how their natural talents and interests can lead to a rewarding career. She spent over 12 years assisting students in middle school, high school, college, and adult education literacy programs navigate through the career exploration and job preparation process. In addition, she coordinates a faith-based ESL program, and she's an enthusiastic facilitator who believes that if you become what you are intended to be, you will set the world on fire.
Welcome, everyone. Again, my name is Victoria Hinojosa. I am your presenter today, and today's topic is No is a complete sentence, learning how to set boundaries at work. So let's start off with a question. My first poll question to you is this. Think about a time you felt overwhelmed at work. What could you have done differently in that situation? Boundaries help us, obviously, to set those parameters so that we don't overstress ourselves, which is a great segue into what we're going to be talking about. The purpose of this webinar is to help equip your students with the skills and the confidence to set these healthy boundaries so that they're not feeling overwhelmed and stressed at work. And we're going to talk about the importance of setting boundaries, why we need to do it. And then I hope to provide you with some activities that you can utilize in your classroom to help your students identify, communicate, set their boundaries, and then handle boundary violations as they occur in a professional manner. A little disclaimer. I have a feeling that what you might hear today may seem obvious to you, but I want you to understand that maybe earlier in your life, there was a time when you weren't as confident and you didn't know how to just say no, or say no in a professional manner without hurting someone's feelings, if that in fact is a problem. A lot of us who are teachers, we tend to be helpers. We tend to be relationship oriented. And so sometimes it's hard for us to say no. If your students are like that, they're going to find that same problem. Or if you have students that come from a foreign country where boundary setting was not something they were culturally able to do, especially in the workplace, or if they're female from a Latin or Asian country, that always tends to be a problem. Or maybe your students are from this country and yet they grew up in a situation where they weren't taught what's the professional way to set your boundaries, to articulate your boundaries without getting fired. In fact, that is the reason why I wanted to do this presentation, is because I did speak to some students from an IET class that I was presenting to when I was with Workforce Solutions. And that was one of the things that kept coming up, is that they were having a difficult time articulating their feelings without getting fired. Let's talk about the definition of boundaries. So when I read this, I was like, aha, here we go. Boundaries are the limits or expectations we set for ourselves. What we have to understand and what we have to help our students understand is that when we're setting boundaries, we are actually preserving ourselves. And a lot of times people think, I want to look good to my employer. I want to do everything. I want to please them. But setting limits and then also being realistic about our own expectations and what we can do physically, mentally, spiritually, or emotionally, whatever, what is that we can do? That is important. So if we look at boundaries as self-preservation, mental health, then I think it might be easier to pass that on to our students. Why are boundaries important then?
Because you can't do everything. Peace of mind and clarity sets limits. You'll not burn out.
What are some of the consequences for not setting boundaries? Not burning out, that's one. Resentment, that's it. Absolutely. Because if you keep saying yes, eventually you're going to feel like you've been taken advantage of. So resentment will creep in. What are the benefits of setting boundaries? I also think it builds confidence when you're able to set those boundaries. When you do that, I think for me personally, it's like when you set those boundaries, like, these are my limitations. This is what I know I can do and what I can't do. After that, it gives you the permission to then say, you know what? I can't do this. This is beyond what I'm able to do. Gives you the permission to say no. I think it also helps with that confidence of being able to say no, if that makes sense. So now let's take a look at how personality values affect our boundaries. I'm a huge fan of personality and values assessments. I think that they're an excellent way to help our students understand themselves better. And there are a lot of free ones that you can take. So the one that I've been using this year with some of the other webinars that I've done recently is the DISC personality model. So the DISC personality model is a simple but powerful framework that can be used to help describe human behavior and the way that we interact with each other. And I think it's a really excellent, simple tool that can be used to help understand work personality types. And the two driving forces that make up this model are the extroverted versus introverted and task-oriented, which you see over here on the left, versus relationship-oriented on the right. What's fascinating is how these two driving forces make up these four personality types. And understand, we are a combination of all of these. Usually we'll have 2 to 3 strong colors and 1 dormant color. Red people are very task-oriented, extroverted. You tend to have a lot of managers that are in this field because they're very driven, they're focused, and they know how to get things done. Then if you move to the yellow, yellow is about influence. This is how you cooperate and influence people. They're relationship driven and they're extroverted. So you'll see a lot of these people in management also, they tend to be people pleasers. I'm one of them. I'm always interested in how people respond to me. If you're worried about how other people see you or respond to you, then sometimes you could see where boundaries become a problem. Same thing with when we move down to green, relationship-oriented introverts. And green is about steadiness and how you respond to change. If you're worried about how others view you, then I think you're going to have issues with boundary setting. Now, we move back over to the left, we go into blue, which is conscientiousness, and this is about how you respond to rules and regulations. I don't think that these people have a problem with boundary setting. I think that they're going to be really good at boundary setting. Now, they may have issues being a good team player, but they're not going to have a problem with setting boundaries. But I do think that task-oriented people can become workaholics very easily, especially the red section. I've met a lot of these people and they're workhorses. They will work on the weekends, on their own personal time. It doesn't matter. They will do the job. The boundary setting may be a little bit different where their work-life balance is very off. There are some free assessments that you can help your students with that are the DISC personality theory assessments, and they're located on 123test.com or truity.com. Those are the two websites that I've seen that offer the DISC personality assessment. The other thing that's important is to help your students identify their values. And these are some questions that you can ask them, but one of the big questions is, what are my biggest regrets at work? What makes me happy? What qualities do I admire? I think that once you have a better understanding, what is it that you're trying to achieve? What are some of the qualities that you admire? What are some of your concerns outside of work too? What are your values outside of work? What are responsibilities that you might have? Or if you don't have, what interests do you have outside of work that can also help you maintain a good, healthy work-life balance? Think about your ideal work-life balance. What are some specific boundaries that you can set to achieve it? And this is a good values exercise that you can do with your students to help them see that boundaries help preserve that work-life balance.
I think for the Reds, that's going to be really, really hard.
Yeah, because they work on weekends. They're doing stuff on the weekends.
That's right. So someone says leave work at the designated time and leave it at work.
I think also having that excuse to do something. I've noticed that if I don't have an activity scheduled for after work, then that gives me an excuse to stay late. That might give me an excuse to crash out and not do other things. Because I am the type of person that I do need my rest, and I will find a way to get my rest, but it has to be balanced.
Don't work during your lunchtime. If you have your email on your phone, how do you set a boundary for yourself and not look at your email when the number keeps growing higher and higher?
That's really hard. We should not be taking our work email on our personal phones. If companies want us to do that, then we really should have another phone, a business phone. All right, so now let's dive more into boundary setting. Here's some really good effective strategies that you can use to help your students really get into boundary setting. Number 1 is active listening. 2 is using I statements. And then 3 is talking about body language and tone of voice, because a lot of times what we say verbally may not match what we're saying physically or in our tone of voice. And then learning how to set those limits and simply say no, but in a professional way. We'll take a deeper dive into each one of these. Let's get started with active listening technique. This is a great little formula that you can use with your students. The first thing you want to do with active listening is you want to focus in, get rid of all the other distractions, get into a quiet space where you can really listen to what the other person is saying. So think about this. Why is active listening important in these scenarios, especially when you're trying to establish boundaries? It's because maybe you are establishing a boundary and someone is responding to that and they're giving you an excuse or a reason. There's conflict. In other words, maybe you setting a boundary initiates some conflict. So the first thing you want to do is listen to what the other person is saying. Now, you may not agree and you may have a response, but first, focus and engage. Listen to what they're saying. Concentrate on what they're saying. Don't start formulating your answer. Listen. Number 2 is paraphrase and clarify. Repeat back to them what they're saying in your own words, and then ask a clarifying question if there's something you don't understand. And then number 3, provide feedback. Now, where this differs in normal active listening is if you were in a counseling situation, but if you're in more of a confrontational situation, providing feedback, this is where you want to acknowledge what the other person is feeling. And so that's important, is to make sure that when you're doing this exercise with your students, and you can create a lot of different scenarios where there's this conflict. And so they have to acknowledge what the other person is thinking or feeling, and then come back and give an answer. So when you give an answer, the best way to do this is to use the I statements. I'm sure you're familiar with this, but for the sake of our students, here's a good example. If you say, "You always interrupt me when I'm talking," you do that with people you're very familiar with, but in formal situations, you don't want to say it like that, even though you may be feeling it. Instead, say, "I feel disrespected when I'm interrupted. Could you wait until I'm finished making my point before you give me your response?" So that makes it much easier. And of course, when you're using these I statements, the reason why you do that is you're putting the onus on you. You're owning your feelings. And you say, "This, when you respond or when you do this, this makes me feel like this." I feel this way. So it's about me, it's about my feelings. Instead of being on the defensive or getting aggressive, this is a much calmer way of addressing the bad behavior or whatever behavior it is. A way to practice this with your students is to come up with different boundary related scenarios. Just some that I've come up with, or you can use ChatGPT to help you come up with these too. Just some great scenarios to start off with. And you might want to even give it a little bit more structure to help them practice making the I statements using that format in these different scenarios. And then the next thing would be role playing exercises where you pair up your students and then have one person be the boundary setter and the other person the boundary receiver, and then have them switch roles so they have experience in both scenarios. You have a well-meaning friend who loves to give unsolicited advice. How do you stop this person from giving advice when all you really need them to do is listen? Here's the format. So I feel something when I'm interrupted, or I feel what? You might even start off with, thank you for your advice. However, I feel condescended to when you give me this advice when I'm really not asking for it. I'm just simply wanting to share my feelings with you. The next step is the power of nonverbal communication. Something else that you want to emphasize with your students is that body language is also huge. About 20% of what we communicate is actually verbal. The rest of it comes from our facial expressions, the tone of voice, and our body language. What is assertive body language as opposed to aggressive body language? I would say having clenched fists is going to be aggressive body language. Keeping a relaxed posture.
Crossed arms, eye contact.
There you go. Oh, eye contact is absolutely necessary. But standing tall, having good eye contact, standing tall but still relaxed. Folding your arms, putting your hands on your hips, those are negative. Very good. So let's talk about tone of voice. Why is that important? Or how is that important? How many times have you heard someone say, I'm not mad? No, I'm not mad. Do you believe them? Or when someone's trying to assert themselves and then they have a very mousy tone of voice and they're stuttering and stammering, that doesn't help either. The key to all of this is when you're trying to say no or you're trying to establish your boundaries is to remain calm. It has to be calm in your voice, calm in your body language. It has to be calm. Yet you could still be very firm in your voice. A lot of times when people want to be firm, their voice drops a little bit. You don't want to drop too low. For men, I know that becomes more of an aggressive tone. So you just have to be careful, but tone of voice is important. So now let's move into the art of saying no. And so I have a really great little example of someone who is not afraid to say no. So let me share this with you really quick.
My weekends are for my family and my friends and my dog and myself, not for my job. Hi, Veronica. Hi. So this Saturday's the kickball tournament. Oh, that's great. Have fun. What do you mean have fun? Are you not planning on showing up? Oh, no, I'm not going to that. We put you down on the roster. We were kind of counting on you. Oh, I didn't know these were paid and mandatory events. Oh, they're not paid. They're voluntary. Then again, I won't be there. My weekends are for my family and my friends and my dog and myself, not for my job. You guys already have me for more time than my family does, so I'm not going to give up my weekends to go play a game with coworkers that I barely even know. That's so disappointing. We were counting on you. We had you down for... Okay. So a couple things. Don't ever include me in any after work or weekend plans. I'm just not interested. My weekends are for my family.
Okay. I think this really articulates how to set boundaries. She is very fierce about setting her boundaries. I think she says a lot of the things that we wish that we could say, and maybe not everybody is equipped to doing that, but gives you a good example of someone who's fierce about boundary setting. However, she's still polite. And here's a real simple way of just saying, no, thank you. I appreciate the offer, but I can't. Unfortunately, I'm not able to. And here's something that I think we also need to stress to people, because I've seen this even with my colleagues, is that they'll over explain. They can't just say no. Sometimes, especially people who are relationship oriented, they feel compelled to explain why it is they can't do something. And they're apologetic and they'll give you the whole, I'm sorry, I can't do this, da, 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 or this went wrong, or they'll give you all kinds of explanation. You're like, hey, no, it's fine. You don't owe anybody an explanation. You saw Veronica. She doesn't have to explain. It's just, no, I'm not doing it. But you can still be very polite about it. And that's something else I think we just need to help our students understand, or anyone who has a hard time saying no. You don't have to over explain. Just simply say no very respectfully and move on. Now, if you feel like you need to give an alternative, then you might say something, you know what, I can't do this right now, but maybe next week. Or, you know what, I have this on my to-do list, but I can't get to it this week. But I promise you it's on my to-do list, so I will look at it when I get back on Monday. Or I'm not available for that, but I could help with something else. Give an alternative. If that makes you feel better, that's a good approach. Another one is with the boundaries. I'm not comfortable with that. This is beyond my expertise. Maybe you should consider talking to so and so. Or I'm sorry, I need to prioritize my own tasks right now. I'm just not able to help you. Or I need some time for myself. That leads into expressing gratitude. So that's a perfect way of handling it. I appreciate you thinking of me, or I'm flattered. However, I'm just not able to attend. Here's some tips for boundary setting. Like I said before, you just don't owe anyone an explanation. While it's polite to offer a brief reason, you don't have to justify your decision. Practice saying no. Help your students to practice saying no in different situations. So I think those scenarios are a really good exercise that you can use with your students, and then help them become confident and assertive. I think the more they practice it, the better. And be kind and respectful. Let's move into setting clear limits. This goes back to self-awareness and reflection. Once you identify your personal values and your priorities, I think that becomes your excuse. Look, I'm sorry, I can't. I have another commitment after work. People with families and with children, this is a given. They have things to do. But for people who don't have those commitments after work, maybe it's, I'm going to go work out after work, or there's a club that I'm going to join after work and we meet on these days. Keeping yourself busy after work helps with that healthy work-life balance. From there, recognizing your personal limits. I know if I don't get enough hours of sleep, then I'm useless the next day. It takes a lot out of me. Determining your emotional, your physical, and your mental limitations is also really fundamental in helping you establish those boundaries. And again, reemphasizing that boundary setting is for our own well-being. It is our own self-care.
Do you have to be sorry when you decline or when you say no? You don't have to say, I'm sorry, do you?
No, not at all. And I think that's a valid question, because a lot of people do feel guilty for saying no. You don't need to feel guilty. You have to be true to yourself. And I think that that's hard for us a lot of times, is to be true to ourselves and realize that I can only do so much in the day. As much as I want to help you for my own mental health, my own emotional well-being, my own physical well-being, I need to move on in my day. That was a very hard thing for me to grasp, is that I need to be true to myself. I'm cheating myself if I don't make that workout. I'm cheating myself. I'm hurting myself if I don't take a break, get up and go eat, or take a break and move on to something else. If I'm constantly thinking about work all day, that stresses me out. So having those boundaries for yourself will help you set those boundaries with other people.
Someone said that they agree with the sleeping at least 7 hours. The brain has to relax after all the daily activities.
Exactly. And it goes back to taking care of yourself. It took a long time for me to realize that boundaries were just as important for me. Boundaries are self-care. You don't have to apologize. You don't have to say, I'm so sorry, I can't help you. Unless, of course, you do have to apologize because you made a commitment and then you have to break it. Then that's a reason for saying, I'm sorry. But for the most part, if it's something where someone's asking you, hey, do you think you can help me? I'm like, no, I wish I could. However, I already have a commitment and I can't break that commitment. Clear and specific limits. So when you're trying to be very specific about your limits, you don't want to use vague statements. You need to be straightforward about what it is that you can or you can't do. And a lot of times people might say, well, I might be able to, or maybe. I'll be honest, maybe means no. And I stress that with people now. If you say maybe, you're really telling me no. So be intentional about what it is that you can or cannot do. Don't give somebody false hope because you don't want to disappoint them. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Be very specific. Time-based limits. Set those time limits for tasks or activities. And this is basic organizational. Time management is set your time, your limits. So you know that my work day is from 8 to 5. And after that, I need to be out the door because I have my gym time, or I have to go pick up my kids, or I have something other commitment that I must do. Or if you've got a flex schedule, then you have to be very intentional about how much time you're going to allot to work, how much time you're going to allot to what other extracurricular activities you have. Another thing that you can do is the quantity-based limits. Limit the amount of time and energy that you'll devote to a specific activity. So maybe you tell somebody, hey, I can give you 30 minutes to an hour on this project. So if you need my help, I'm available at 2 o'clock this afternoon and I can give you an hour. I'll meet you in your office and let's go. I was working with a colleague one time who is really good about time management, and I saw it. She goes, you know what, Victoria, we scheduled 2 hours in the morning for this project. We need to move on. Let's stop. Now we need to spend the next 2 hours on this other project that we have going. And I'm like, you're absolutely right. Let's do it. That just helps you stay on track. It gives you peace of mind, and it helps you with those boundaries. What happens when somebody violates your boundaries? What do you do? When you're setting your limits, you want to be clear and you want to be direct. Clearly state what behavior is unacceptable. And then use I statements. Express how that behavior makes you feel. So if somebody does something that really makes you mad, like, I like colored pens. Those are my colored pens. They're the ones that I brought from the house. They're paid for from my money. So if somebody takes my colored pen, I know they took it from me because that's not office issued. You could say, hey, I really don't like it when people take things that belong to me. This is not office property. This is my property. I don't mind you borrowing it while you're in my office, but I'd like you to return my pink pen. Thank you. You see what I'm saying? And then set specific consequences. Don't threaten, but you need to be clear about your boundary violations. Maybe in this case, just say, please stop using the pen. When you're in my office, you can't use my pens. Something along those lines. I'm not sure, but you get the idea. Let's say it's a much more serious matter and you say, okay, if this continues, I'm going to have to talk to management about this behavior. So maybe it's that the person is not getting their work done on time for the project or whatever it is. Then you say, look, if you can't do this, then I'm going to have to talk to management. And then when you're communicating consequences, be firm but fair. Don't threaten someone. So if you continue to take my pen, I'm going to come after you. No. Avoid threats, but be prepared to follow through. So if you say, look, I feel let down when you don't do your part of the project. I feel very disappointed and let down because I'm counting on you. We're supposed to be a team here and you're not doing your part. So if this continues, then I'm going to have to report you to our manager. Now, I don't want to do that, but I will. And then always be prepared to follow through. So whatever consequences that you state, you have to follow through on those. And then lastly, seek support. So maybe you talk to your manager, your supervisor, maybe you talk to HR, or just talk to a friend or someone else in your emotional support system to help you kind of bounce ideas off or whatever. And then lastly, some additional tips is that document those incidents. If it continues to happen, document everything. And then practice self-care. Those boundaries are self-care. That helps you a lot. Limit your contact with the person, trust your instincts, and don't blame yourself. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Remember that you have the right to set boundaries and that it's not your fault if someone violates them. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this webinar today.
We hope you enjoyed this pre-recorded webinar. After you have passed the final test with a score of 80% or greater and have received your certificate of completion, please take a few moments to complete the course evaluation. Participant feedback helps Train PD at TCAL continue to provide high-quality professional development. To leave a course feedback, please go to the completed portion of your transcript. To do this, hover over the My Learning tab and select View Your Transcript. Click on the drop-down arrow next to the word Active and select Completed. Then, click Evaluate in the drop-down menu next to the course you just completed. Please note that your feedback is greatly appreciated.